I'm a psychologist that uses genetics, basically. And I'm here to tell you, as asked by MQ and Andrew, about remote big data collection in mental health, lessons from the GLAD study. And GLAD stands for Genetic Links to Anxiety and Depression, which was a study that we launched a few years back. So this is a quick overview of when we talk about what we did, what went well, what didn't go well, and what we learned. And it's going to be a bit of a quick rattle tour. So we launched in September 2018, in England, and then a little bit later, maybe a few months later, to the rest of the UK. We actually had about 6 months' time to plan this study from funding, and the funding call was only about 2 months before that. So it was the shortest piece of work preparation I've ever done, and also the biggest study I've ever done. So you can work out what that might have caused in terms of problems. So the aim was to recruit 40,000 people with lived experience of anxiety or depression, to get consent from them for recontact for future medical research and other research studies, and record linkage to their medical records. At baseline, we collected detailed information about their lifetime experience of relevant symptoms, environmental experiences such as trauma, and importantly, we then sent them a saliva kit through the post to get genotypes. And this was basically the flagship study of the NIHR mental health bioresource. And it sits within our NIHR-funded Biomedical Research Centre at King's. We are part of the overall NIHR bioresource, but the way we launched and ran the study was run independently, with the genotyping being done at the NIHR Centre in Cambridge. And the recruitment of participants happened via a website. This is a picture of what the front page looked like, using traditional media and also social media. And so to help with that, one of the things that we did that I'm perhaps most proud of is that I find it quite hard to read long documents, and you know what it's all like. We were all talking about apps earlier. If you want to use it, you just say yes to everything. But actually, I think it's really important when somebody consents to a study that they do understand what they're consenting to. And so we had an animation made, which is what that is at the bottom, which went through all the key points that formed our sort of consent form as signed off by ethics. And so it explained what a bioresource was, it explained what recontact was, and it did it all with useful imagery, so that people who were struggling to capture that information from all the text on the website, and I think it's even worse if people are looking at it on a phone or something. So anyway, I was really proud of that. And then the upper image is a video of myself and Jerome Breen. Jerome Breen is the director of our NIHR bioresource, and he and I launched GLAD together. And that was a short video of us talking about why we thought the study mattered and what the purpose was and what we hoped to achieve with it. And those were some of the information that we used at the start. So we launched on ITV News, and it got taken up all over the place by broadsheets and things. And also we worked really closely with a whole load of different relevant organisations and individuals with lived experience. So MQ supported us, lots of other charities in the sector supported us. Mind were particularly supportive. British Psychological Society and the Royal College of Psychiatrists both got behind us, and it got taken up and sort of spun off in terms of broadsheets and radio programs and TV programs and all the rest of it. So it kicked off pretty quickly. This is what we ask at baseline. I'm not going to read them all out, but just to say we do include some of the common measures that were being talked about earlier, PHQ-9 and GAD-7. Anybody here who works with the IAPT service will know that those are IAPT measure as well, which is a service I'm particularly interested in. So that was part of the reason for that. But also because we did it all in such a rush, that there's a lot of commonality between what we did and what was in the first mental health assessment of UK Biobank, because we wanted to ensure that we could work together. Geneticists have been working together for about 20 years, so we're all quite good at this whole thinking jointly thing. And in fact, I'm also PI and director of TED's Twins Early Development Study, who are now in their 20s, and they are all completing almost identical set of measures at the moment as well. So I'm a massive believer in this let's all use the same measures perspective. I think it's really helpful. So a little bit about who we recruited. These slides are really quite out of date now, but the person that ran the beautiful R scripts to make them has moved on. So it probably looks much the same now. And basically what you've got, just to walk you through them, because I've got a couple that are similar, is everything in green refers to what that data looks like in the whole of the UK, and everything in blue is what we've got in GLAD. So you can see that in 16 to 19-year-olds, we're overrepresented in women compared to the population, and underrepresented in men compared to the population. And that overrepresentation in women carries out throughout the study, but is not terribly surprising given what we know about proportionate prevalence rates of anxiety and depression in men and women across the UK. But so you can see that it's oh no, that's strange. That figure has gone very tiny. So the other thing we've got over here is that should have been really nice large circle. Perhaps that's because that's one of the things I'm least proud of in the study, is that we did really badly at recruiting individuals from different global racial and ethnic groups. So across the UK as a whole, I can't even guess what the percentage I had. The percentage is something like 10 or 15%, and we've got just under half of that in GLAD. So it's obviously much higher than that in London, but across the country as a whole, it's about twice what we got in the study. So clearly not doing as well as we would like to on that front. In terms of education, we have similar issues to what you saw in UK Biobank. So we've done better in terms of more highly educated individuals. So university degree just totally gets my brain each time. University degree is this side of the figure, not having university degree is this side of the figure, and GLAD is the blue one. So you can see that the individuals in the age where they would have had done their degree if they were going to, we've got kind of more people with a degree than you might expect, which again is typical of what you see. It's a kind of healthy, highly educated volunteer bias that you see. But on the other hand, we do have people in all these groups, and we don't have such tiny numbers that we really are totally unrepresented in any area. And we did have our recruitment start from age 16, and we did recruit people from that age and up, which was encouraging. This is quite interesting. This is how somebody came into the study, and you can see that in the younger age group, so 16 to 29, the vast majority of them came through social media, which I'm going to tell you more about in a minute, whereas in the older part of the population, 70 plus, we got far more coming from traditional media. So for example, reading about us in The Guardian, seeing us on the telly at the launch. And then this is just a spread of a geographical spread. Again, that one's about a year old. That's an even more complicated R script. No way I would get my head around that one. But nice to see that we do cover across the country. And the darker the colour it is, the greater the density of recruitment there. And you can see we had a site in Cornwall who were doing brilliantly, because after we launched, we had a whole load of NHS sites get in touch and say, this sounds a really important study. Can we recruit for you? And we hadn't intended to recruit through clinical sites, but since they were kind of asking to, we did. And some of them have been completely fabulous. The numbers on the right are as they stand at the moment. So we have about 55,000 people who have consented, and about 45,000 of those have finished their sign-up survey, and about over 30,000 now have sent in their saliva sample. So we're well on our way to 40,000. And the goal of the study is really just to support recruitment into research. It's actually really quite difficult to recruit people with anxiety and depression sometimes. And so this is a way to kind of enable and support that, and people can be recruited into any other kind of study from GLAD. So they can come into experimental medicine trials, they can come into genomic trials, you can recruit on the basis of their sign-up data, on the basis of their DNA, and shortly on the basis of their medical record information, because we're also in the process of linking to that. And so we hope that will enable a whole heap of different kinds of studies to take place. And I think it was that element of it, and the fact that the purpose of the NIHR bioresource is to encourage recruitment and enable recruitment, that meant we got such good buy-in from a lot of the charities and organisations that we partnered with. So what went well? Well, the external endorsement went really well. This was a piece in the British Psychological Society's Psychologist Journal. This was a parallel one in the Royal College of Psychiatrists Journal. This was a piece in Anxiety UK. This was a post on Mind's Facebook page. Top right is the chief exec, or what, can't quite remember if that's the right title, of Gadio, who did like a whole series of interviews on Gadio about taking part in the study. So actually that went really well. We have fantastic LGBTQ plus representation in the sample. So what went well? Well, the use of paid social media went really well. So Mina mentioned it earlier. It can be a really cost-effective way of recruiting people. The one thing I would say is a cautionary note is you get more people like the people you already have. So if you've ended up with a bit of a bias sample and your social media has worked on those people, then that just carries on. And I was hoping I would be able to click on that little button there, which would have shown you one of our little ads that Mind supported for us, but I don't seem to have anything other than a clicker, so I can't. But I would say that it takes a bit of time to get it optimized, and you can try and tweak your optimization to get a different group. So I experimented with this one summer. I was feeling really frustrated at the lack of men, and particularly young men, signing up. And so I decided, Jerome had a hip replacement surgery and was out of the office for 4 weeks. So I thought, right, I'm in charge. We're going to get lots more men. And the men were like 10 times as expensive as the women. He came back and was very cross with me, because ultimately what NIHR wanted us to do was recruit a certain number. But I do think these issues around representativeness are important. So slightly joking, but slightly not. You just have to spend more time and money to recruit people who are. Oh, it is playing it. Oh, look, there you are. There's one of them. So that's one of our ads. And we did quite a lot of work with individuals with lived experience to ask them what they found motivating and important, and then use that in these pieces. Okay, so what didn't go so well? Well, the representativeness didn't go so well. We did do a great job on representation of LGBTQ+, and we did great on white middle-class women. We didn't do so well on individuals from a whole range of ethnic and racial minority backgrounds, and we didn't do so well on recruiting men. You know, they're all in there, just not in proportionate numbers. We had some things go wrong. So the website crashed on the launch day, which was extremely annoying. And so we clearly hadn't done enough testing. And inevitably, with putting it together so quickly, there were a few mistakes, so missing items from questionnaires and things. So those were all things that didn't go so well. But what did we learn? So, well, technical preparation, like 10 times, right? Preparation on the slide. Really just organising ourselves so that we didn't leave anything to chance. So we had tested lots of aspects of the website, but it's amazing how when you chuck thousands of people at something, it breaks, when it was fine when you were only chucking 1 or 2 at it. So when I was talking to Jerome about what I should say to you all today, he was saying, tell them to have a dry launch. Or a soft launch, I think he said. So that's what that picture's for, that basically if you're going to do something like this, you want to have a soft launch before your live launch and get, like, ideally over 1,000, maybe even more than that, people to do it. Make sure that it doesn't crash on the day, because then you lose people when excitement's at its highest, which is a shame. If you're going to use this kind of approach, you need a PR company. We went out to tender and met with various different ones, and the one we went with was absolutely brilliant for traditional media. And they were really helpful in getting us those ITV News and Guardian and like, I mean, just enormous numbers of local radio stations took it up and things. But they weren't so great at advising us on the social media. And in the end, we moved away from them after the launch and went to a social media specialist PR company who were completely brilliant. And that little one that I just had playing there, that was made by them. So we ended up working with 2 different PR companies. And so then, what do we learn about online recruitment? Well, communication with participants is obviously really important. So some of the motivators for people joining GLAD were finding out more about this condition that has so greatly influenced their life, finding out more about what it meant for them and their family, finding out more about hoping to improve, what felt like a bit of a treatment lottery situation, these kinds of questions. And a lot of them wanted to know more about the genetics. And a lot of them had questions, and they wanted to contact us about those questions. And we had a lot of dialogue, have still now a lot of dialogue via email and social media posts. But sometimes you feel like you're saying something to this one person and more people would benefit from hearing that. and a Twitter post or something just isn't long enough. It's however many characters it is. And so what we did is we actually, my lab have a blog anyway, which in fact I meant to mention this morning, because we've written loads of blogs about all sorts of aspects of life as researchers, including grant writing and work-life balance and that kind of stuff, if it interests you. But the series we wrote to support the GLAD participants was called Our Mythbusters. And we wrote a whole heap of pieces about why it was important to look at genetics in mental health, why something like depression is real, these kinds of things. So lots of the questions that they were coming to us with that we felt needed longer than a short answer, because they'd often ask us on social media, we would respond with a blog. Was really important, again, to benefit from the experts with lived experience that we were working with, who often advised us on much of this. And just to add again that this part all takes time. So the kind of human-facing angle of a big project like this takes a lot of time, as does the technical angle, and you have to do both. So how do you earn social media? You can pay for social media. That's what those little yellow things were. They were the ones we were paying to put content behind. But in terms of earning interest from the media in the first place at the launch, and then earning attention from social media, the thing we kept being told is it's all about the story. You've got to have a story. You've got to make people interested in your story. And to do that, you've got to bring it alive. You've got to have individuals who this is their story. This is their life. And for them, this will make a big difference. So we had lots and lots of individuals with lived experience working with us, providing quotes, providing interviews, turning up at TV and radio stations. One piece of advice there: get a backup, maybe even a second backup, because particularly for those who it was going to be their first time talking publicly about it, inevitably some then decided they didn't want to on the day, and if you haven't planned for that, you're kind of a bit stuffed. So that would be a good bit of learning. Make sure you have 2 or 3 for each interview, so that if one doesn't then feel like coming, you've still got somebody. We also worked with well-known names to try and I guess a sort of influencer type of approach. And I loved hearing about Mina's thoughts about TikTok. TikTok wasn't quite a thing then. I mean, it's only 3 or 4 years ago, but TikTok is that new. I've got a 14-year-old who watches it all the time. So I think if you want teenagers, that's the way to go. But we used a whole range of influencers from vastly different backgrounds and with different reasons for their interests in the project. But they have to be people that people can connect to, that they like, trust, respect, and who have a reason why they speak from the heart about it. So Gabby Logan was one of our influencers, and perhaps not very well known fact about her is that she had a brother who committed suicide when they were much, much younger. And I knew her because our children happened to go to school together. But we had lots of other influencers as well, some who came through charities and organisations. And in fact, our work with charities and other organisations, including MQ, was a really huge part of how we got the messaging right at the beginning, because we collaborated with all of them to find out what they thought it was important that we do when starting a big initiative like this, so that we felt like we were speaking for a much bigger community than just ourselves. And the project isn't really a project, it is literally a resource. It's there for the whole community, and that was really at the heart of how it was all set up. In terms of doing stuff ourselves on social media, Twitter was quite good for getting new attention. It's obviously very good for getting attention from your academic colleagues, but also it was sometimes quite good for getting attention from participants. Facebook was much better for maintaining relationships because there was space to kind of have slightly longer conversations. For younger audiences, Instagram turned out to be best. And you do need to have lots of nice content, and it needs to be visual. And again, that all takes a lot of time. And so a mixture of images and also video footage. So as well as the consent animation that I told you about earlier and the video about why we were doing the study, we also had a kind of cartoon animation on the bottom right there that very clearly kind of described the purpose of the study. So it sort of went beyond the consent aspects and talked about why the study was happening. So that's a very quick rattle-stop tour through what we did, and these are some of the people who helped, and there are many others whose names aren't in there, many of whom are encapsulated in this phrase, the bioresource team. But we did have a lot of help, and but the data's all there. So do contact us if you're interested in recruiting into a study using it. That's what it's for. And happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Thalia. It's a real pleasure to use the GLAD website, isn't it? It's really lovely, professionally designed and extremely smooth. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Thank you for that talk. It's really interesting. I had a question about recruiting with social media. So we were talking earlier in the funding panel, but how do you think the success of social media recruitment for research studies will influence research funding budgets in the future?
I'm not sure. That's sort of cart before the horse. I'm not sure that social media recruitment will influence the funding budgets. I think other things that we have very little control over influence the funding budgets. But I think recruiting this way can be a more cost-effective way, particularly if you need large numbers. And so that can be beneficial financially as well as from the sort of practical statistical power kind of point of view. And the reason Jerome and I wanted to do this study is because we're part of the Psychiatric Genetics Consortium and we need these huge, great big numbers. And I in particular wanted to actually have measured all of the wide variety of anxiety disorders well enough to actually be able to use that information, and that just wasn't available anywhere else. But there are these very clear pitfalls that I've tried to be very clear about in terms of the kinds of people that you get if you recruit that way. So they have to be people that have access to the internet in the first place. So it's a very first world way of recruiting. And there are other known biases. So I think it, like any method of recruitment, it's got its strengths and it's got its weaknesses, and you just need to be aware of those and consider whether they're fatal for the question that you have or whether they're tolerable.
Other questions? Yeah.
Hi, thank you for a great talk. Just saying, I work on the radar study and we use GLAD as one of our key kind of ways to recruit participants. So it's definitely a very great resource for that. But my question is, I'm not sure if you're really able to answer this, but kind of maybe taking one of the trusts that you were kind of working with or one of the key sites, how many research assistants did it take to kind of deal with that communication that you said was kind of a key part of that recruitment, kind of having that communication with the participants and answering those questions? Because speaking from personal experience as a research assistant, it does kind of take a lot of manpower to do that. And obviously at such a giant scale like the GLAD study, I'm just wondering if there's like a number or any experience that you can speak to kind of on the ground dealing with that.
Sure. So in the GLAD team, I mean, it's not a massive team. We have one lead research assistant, and there was normally 2 or 3 research assistants supporting, one of whom might be primarily responsible for communication with the NHS trusts that were recruiting for us. And then we nearly always had 3 or 4 undergraduate placement students with us who would come for the year, and we would pay them an honorarium rather than a salary, and we would train them far more than we would need to with a graduate research assistant. But yeah, that's one of the reasons why we wrote the blogs, because it was just more efficient to do it that way. And I would just say they worked very hard. It's not a particularly well-resourced study. You would expect that it was, being so large, but actually it's, yeah, we've just had to be quite efficient.
Question here.
Thank you, fantastic talk. I was just wondering what stage of the kind of data analysis is, and if the data will be open to external applications as well as kind of recruitment grounds.
Yeah, absolutely, it will be. And Andrew just mentioned our lovely website, which has been lovely, but we are in the process of moving to a new website, a major purpose of which is that there's now going to be a whole drop-down menu for researchers who want to access it. And we have kind of built our approach to that by looking at what UK Biobank do, what TEDS does, what AusBac does, making sure there's going to be a user-friendly data dictionary and a relatively straightforward and simple process for requesting the data. So yes, there will be. It's just that we've been so busy making the whole thing happen and getting the data clean and getting really nice scripts for that we've not got to the point of finishing that yet, but I think it's coming around the corner. I suspect it'll be in the next year or so that we're ready to do that.
Well, thanks very much, Thalia. That's a wonderfully clear presentation, and I suspect glad it's got a lot further to go before we've heard the rest of it. So,
I hope so.
thank you very much.